Lyra's journey took her far from the comforts of her home planet into the unknown. She found herself on a small, quiet planet known for its simplicity and peace. The contrast between this new world and the one she had left behind was striking. Here, there were no towering structures or lavish buildings. Instead, humble homes dotted the landscape, and the air was free from the constant buzz of high-tech machinery. This place felt more alive, more real. It was everything Lyra had been searching for. For the first time in what felt like forever, Lyra was able to walk freely without the weight of expectations pressing down on her. She wasn't a princess here. She was just another person. As she roamed the marketplace, surrounded by people who seemed unburdened by status, she couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. The constant pressure of her family's ambitions, the endless suitors, and the expectations of her role, all of it seemed a distant memory. It was in this peaceful place, among simple folk, that Lyra first met him. He was standing at a stall, inspecting some fruit. The human man, dressed in plain clothes, was focused on picking out the best produce, unaware of the alien woman watching him. His eyes were focused, his hands moving with a sense of purpose, but there was no arrogance about him. He wasn't looking for anything, and he didn't seem to be anyone of great importance. It was this ordinary nature that caught her attention. Lyra couldn't help but stare. She had never seen someone quite like him before. There was something about his presence that felt different from the men she was used to. He wasn't intimidated by her beauty, nor was he interested in her status. He was simply living. She had never encountered someone so unaffected by the power dynamics she had grown up with. When he finally turned to face her, Lyra quickly looked away, her cheeks flushing slightly. But something in his eyes made her heart skip a beat. There was kindness there, a warmth that felt completely foreign to her. It wasn't the kind of warmth that came from someone trying to gain something, but rather the kind that came from genuine curiosity and openness. She took a deep breath and walked up to him, her heart pounding in her chest. "Excuse me," she said, her voice trembling slightly. The human man looked up, his expression friendly but curious. "Yes, can I help you?" Lyra paused for a moment, unsure of how to begin. She wasn't used to speaking to someone so casually. I was just wondering what it's like here, on this planet. It's so different from where I'm from," she explained, her words spilling out more freely than she had expected. He smiled, a soft, genuine smile that made Lyra feel at ease. "It's peaceful here. People don't worry much about what others think, and everyone looks out for each other. It's simple, but it works." His answer was straightforward, and yet it resonated deeply with Lyra. It was the simplicity of his life, his unassuming nature, that made her feel like she could be herself for once. For the first time, she felt like she wasn't being judged for who she was, but simply seen as a person. "I've never felt like this before," she admitted quietly. "Back home, everything was about power, about appearances. It's exhausting." The human man looked at her with understanding. "Sounds tough," he said simply. "But here, we focus on the things that really matter, like kindness, and finding happiness in the little things." Lyra felt something stir inside her. Could it be that this man, with his simple life and straightforward way of thinking, might be the answer to everything she had been searching for? She had no idea then that this brief encounter would change her life forever. The days that followed Lyra's first encounter with the human man were filled with unexpected moments of connection. Every time she returned to the marketplace, she found herself searching for him. It was strange, this pull she felt towards someone so different from the men she had known. But there was something genuine about him that intrigued her. It wasn't his appearance or his simple clothes. It was his presence. His calm, unhurried manner made her feel like she could finally breathe. One evening, after another quiet conversation with him about the planet's way of life, Lyra couldn't hold back any longer. The words had been sitting in her chest, waiting for the right moment. As the sun dipped low in the sky, casting a warm, golden hue over everything, Lyra decided it was time to take the chance she had been thinking about for so long. She found him sitting on a bench near the edge of the town square, watching the people pass by. The evening air was cool, and the quiet sounds of the town gave the whole scene a peaceful feel. Lyra took a deep breath and walked toward him, her heart racing. This was unlike anything she had ever done before. She had never felt so vulnerable, so unsure of what the response might be. When he saw her approach, he gave her a welcoming smile, as though he had been expecting her. "Hey, Lyra," he greeted warmly, standing up from the bench. "Hello," she replied, her voice soft. She hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to begin, but the words tumbled out before she could stop them. Will you be my husband?" The suddenness of her question left the man momentarily speechless, his brow furrowed in confusion, unsure if he had heard her correctly. He took a step back, as if trying to process what she had said. "What? I mean, why would you ask me that?" He looked genuinely confused, his eyes searching hers for an explanation. Lyra felt her cheeks flush. This wasn't how she had imagined the moment playing out. She had thought it would be easier, smoother, but now it seemed like she had made a mistake. She quickly tried to explain herself. "I know this is sudden, but I don't want to live a life full of expectations and power anymore. I've spent my entire life in a world where everything is about status, and I'm tired of it. I want something real, something simple. And when I met you, I felt like you were the kind of person who could give me that." She stopped, her breath shaky, her heart pounding. "You don't have to say yes. I needed to ask. I don't want to keep living this way." The human man stared at her, still processing her words. For a moment, silence hung between them. Lyra braced herself for rejection, as she had been rejected so many times before. But when he spoke, his voice was soft and kind. "You're asking a lot," he said slowly. "But I can see that you're looking for something real. I can't pretend to know what it's like for you, but if you really want to build something like that with me, I'm willing to try." Lyra felt a wave of relief wash over her. It wasn't the grand declaration of love she had dreamed of, but it was something. And it was real. With a quiet smile, she nodded. "Thank you. That's all I need. I don't need a grand life, just one where I can be myself." As the evening settled into night, the two of them sat together, silently watching the stars appear one by one in the sky. Lyra had taken a chance at something she hadn't believed was possible, and for the first time in a long while, she felt hope stirring in her heart. The days after Lyra's proposal were a whirlwind of emotions. She had taken the leap, asking the human, a simple man, to be her husband. In the quiet corners of her mind, doubts began to creep in. Was she being foolish? Could a life with someone so different really bring her the peace and love she had always longed for? Lyra found herself walking the streets of the small town more often now, hoping to see the human man. His name was Eli. She had learned a lot about him over the past few days. He was kind, hardworking, and lived a life that was nothing like hers. He was humble, not seeking fame or power. His world was full of simple joys, things like fresh bread from the local bakery and quiet afternoons spent reading books. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she didn't belong in his world. She sat at a table in a small cafe, watching the people around her, and her thoughts drifted to her family, to the world she had left behind. Her father's stern face, her mother's cold disapproval. They would never understand her choice. They would see it as a betrayal. And Eli, despite his kindness, might someday regret choosing a woman like her, a woman from a planet of power and politics. Lyra's heart sank as the weight of her family's expectations pressed down on her. She had been raised to believe that she had to marry for status, for family alliances. She had been taught that love, real love, was secondary to what someone could bring to the table. She had thrown all of that away for a chance at something different, something real. But now, sitting in this cafe, she wondered if she had made the right choice. Her mind wandered to Eli. He had agreed to her proposal, but was it just out of sympathy? Did he truly see her for who she was? Or did he only see the woman from the powerful alien family? What if, one day, he realized he had made a mistake? What if he regretted choosing her, a woman who had never truly known what it was like to live without the weight of her family's influence? Lyra's hands shook slightly as she stirred her tea. She was afraid. Afraid that her world would tear apart if things went wrong, afraid of disappointing Eli, afraid that her past would catch up to her. She had never asked for any of this. She had never asked to be the daughter of a powerful family. She had never asked to be judged by her status. Just then, Eli entered the cafe. His eyes found hers almost immediately, and he walked over with his usual easy smile. "Hey," he greeted softly, sitting down across from her. "You look like you're a million miles away." Lyra gave him a small smile. "Just thinking." He studied her for a moment before speaking again. "You've been thinking about your family, haven't you?" She didn't answer right away, but nodded slowly. "I don't know if I'm making the right choice. Sometimes I feel like I'm running away from everything I've known. What if I'm just fooling myself?" Eli reached across the table, placing his hand over hers. His touch was warm, reassuring. "I don't know your past, Lyra, but I know that right now, you're here with me. And that's enough. I'm not asking for perfection. I'm just asking to try. Together." Lyra looked into his eyes, and for the first time since she had arrived on this planet, she felt a sense of calm. His words weren't grand promises, but they were real, and they meant something. Maybe this wasn't about perfection. Maybe it was about trying together, to make something real out of the mess they both found themselves in. As the doubts in her heart slowly faded, Lyra realized that the only thing she could truly control was the present moment. And in this moment, she wanted to be with him, no matter what the future might hold. As the weeks passed, Lyra found herself spending more and more time with Eli. Their connection deepened, and she began to understand him in ways she hadn't expected. The more they talked, the more she realized how much she had been missing in her life. Her world had always been about appearances, wealth, and power. But Eli's world was different. His world was about honesty, kindness, and simple joys. One afternoon, as they sat by a quiet lake on the edge of the town, Lyra couldn't help but notice how at peace Eli seemed. He was always calm, never rushed, and he had a way of making even the most ordinary moments feel special. Watching him, Lyra felt something shift inside her. For the first time in years, she felt like she could truly be herself. "Eli," she began, her voice soft, "I never realized how much I was missing. Back home, everything was about what I was supposed to do, who I was supposed to be. I was never really allowed to live for myself." Eli looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "I can't imagine what that must have been like. But you're here now, Lyra. You're making your own choices." She smiled, but the smile was tinged with sadness. "I am, but it's hard. Every part of me was trained to think in a certain way. I don't know how to break free from all of that." He reached out and gently took her hand, his touch warm and comforting. "You're already doing it. You're here with me, in a place that doesn't care about status or power. You're choosing what makes you happy, and that's something not many people get to do." Lyra's heart swelled with emotion. She had spent so much of her life wondering if she would ever be able to escape the expectations of her family and society. But with Eli, it felt different. He didn't judge her for her past, didn't expect her to be anyone other than who she was in that moment. And for the first time, she felt like she didn't have to be perfect to be loved. Their days together were filled with quiet moments, long walks through the town, shared meals at the local cafe, and hours spent talking about everything and nothing. Eli shared stories of his life, of growing up in a small town where nothing ever changed. His life was simple, and yet it was full of meaning. He had taught her so much about living without the need for recognition or wealth, about finding happiness in the little things. In return, Lyra shared her own stories. Though some of them were painful to tell, she spoke of her family, her planet, and the pressure she had always felt to be perfect. She spoke of the loneliness she had carried, despite being surrounded by people who were constantly trying to control her life. Eli listened patiently, never interrupting, never judging. He simply allowed her to speak, and for the first time, Lyra felt heard. She felt like her words, her feelings, mattered. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Lyra realized something she hadn't fully understood before. She had come to this planet seeking freedom, seeking a chance at a different life. But in doing so, she had found something even more valuable. She had found someone who made her believe that she could truly start over, that she could choose her own future. Eli wasn't just a man from a simple world. He was the one who had shown her what it meant to live without fear of judgment. And in that moment, Lyra knew that no matter what the future held, she wanted to face it with him by her side. One morning, as Lyra sat on the porch of their small home, the quiet stillness of the town was interrupted by the sound of a messenger from her planet. He arrived with a formal letter, sealed with the emblem of her family. Lyra's heart sank as she took the letter from the messenger, the weight of it suddenly too much to bear. Her past had found its way into the present, and she knew this would be no ordinary letter. Eli noticed her hesitation as she stared at the letter, and he walked over to her. "What is it?" he asked gently, sensing her unease. Lyra hesitated, the words she needed to say stuck in her throat. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "It's from my family," she said quietly. "They want me to return home. They don't approve of what I've done, and they want me to marry someone from our own kind, someone powerful. They want me to forget all of this. Forget you. Forget this life." Eli's expression softened as he sat beside her. "What are you going to do?" Lyra ran her fingers over the letter, her thoughts a storm inside her mind. "I don't know. I've already chosen this life with you, but they don't understand. They've never understood. They'll never let me go without a fight." Eli looked at her seriously, his voice calm but firm. "Then maybe we need to give them a reason to understand. Maybe it's time we show them that this life, the one we've built together, is real and worth fighting for." Lyra turned to him, surprised by his words. "What do you mean? How could we possibly make them understand? My family is powerful. They won't listen to me. They only care about status, about power." Eli smiled gently. "We don't need their approval. What we need is to trust in what we have. If we stand strong, if we show them that this, what we're building, is stronger than their power, maybe they'll have no choice but to accept it." His words resonated with her, but fear still lingered in her heart. How could they face the overwhelming power of her family? Would they really stand a chance against the years of control and expectation that had shaped her life? But Eli's determination was infectious. He had never backed down from anything, not once since they had met. His quiet strength made her believe that they could face whatever came their way together. After a long silence, Lyra nodded. "You're right. We've come this far. I won't let fear hold me back anymore." The next morning, they made the decision. They would travel back to her planet, but not as the same people who had left. They would stand together, showing her family that she had made her own choice, and that their love was something worth fighting for. It was a risk. There was no guarantee that her family would accept them, but it was a risk she was willing to take. Together, they boarded a ship that would take them to her home planet. Lyra felt a mixture of fear and hope as the ship began its journey, but one thing was clear in her heart. She was no longer the person who had left her family behind. She had changed. She had found something real. And no matter what happened, she wasn't going to let that go. As the stars streaked past them, Lyra looked over at Eli, her heart swelling with a new sense of trust. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it side by side. This was their test of trust, and Lyra was ready. The journey back to Lyra's home planet was long and filled with silence. As the ship moved through the stars, Lyra could feel the weight of what was to come pressing down on her. She had no illusions about how difficult this would be. She was about to face the people who had controlled her life for so long, the people who had made her feel like She could never be her true self. When they finally arrived, the vastness of her home planet stretched out before them. It looked as grand and powerful as ever, with its towering cities and gleaming spires. But to Lyra, it felt like a prison. The people who walked the streets were all too familiar, powerful, influential, and determined to maintain the status quo. They were not the simple, kind people she had come to know in Ela's world. These people were obsessed with control, and they would never understand her decision to leave everything behind. As she and Eli walked through the city, Lyra felt like an outsider. The whispers followed them wherever they went. People stared, eyes filled with judgment and curiosity. Her family's influence was everywhere, and it made her feel small once again. When they reached her family's estate, Lyra's heart beat faster. She hadn't set foot here in months, but it felt like a lifetime. The grand entrance loomed before them, guarded by large, intimidating figures. It was a symbol of everything Lyra had wanted to escape. Her father was waiting inside, his stern face betraying no emotion. Her mother stood beside him, her eyes cold and calculating. The moment Lyra stepped into the room, her family's gaze was upon her, sharp and demanding. "You've returned," her father said, his voice as commanding as ever. "And you bring this human with you." His eyes narrowed as he looked at Eli. "What is this, Lyra? Are you so desperate that you've lowered yourself to this level?" Lyra's heart sank. The harshness in her father's voice cut deeper than she had expected. But she stood tall, holding Eli's hand firmly in hers. "This is Eli. He's the one I've chosen to be with. I know you don't understand, but I've made my decision." Her mother stepped forward, her gaze cold and calculating. "You think we will allow this? You think we will let you marry a human? Your duty is to our family, to your status. You've chosen a life of foolishness." Lyra felt the sting of her mother's words, but she refused to let them break her. "I've chosen a life of freedom. A life where I can be myself, without the pressure of power and wealth hanging over me. I don't care about status anymore. I care about what makes me happy." Her father's voice grew even colder. "You are disobeying everything we've built. You've embarrassed this family, and you've embarrassed yourself. Do you think this human will be able to protect you? He is nothing compared to the alliances you could have had. You are throwing away everything for a foolish dream." Lyra's anger rose. "No, father. I'm throwing away the chains you've placed on me my entire life. I'm not a prize to be won. I'm not some asset to be used for political gain." Her father's face twisted in anger. "You will regret this. You have no idea what you're dealing with. You've made a choice that will destroy you." At that moment, Lyra felt something shift within her. The fear that had gripped her for so long began to fade. She wasn't afraid anymore. She had Eli by her side, and that was all that mattered. But just as the tension in the room reached its peak, one of Lyra's closest confidants stepped forward. It was a familiar face, someone she had trusted, someone she had confided in. But now this person looked at her with cold eyes, betraying any trust they had once shared. "You're making a mistake, Lyra," the confidant said, their voice quiet but filled with venom. "You've chosen to abandon your family, your people, for nothing. And I won't stand by and watch you destroy everything we've worked for." Lyra's heart shattered as she realized that this betrayal was real. The person she had trusted had turned against her, siding with her family's expectations instead of her own happiness. She looked at Eli, who squeezed her hand in support. The road ahead would be harder than she had ever imagined, but for the first time, Lyra was no longer afraid to face it. She had Eli, and together, they would find a way to make their love and their future work, no matter what anyone else thought. The battle wasn't over, but Lyra knew one thing for sure. She was no longer willing to go back to the life she had once known. No matter how hard her family fought, she would stand strong with the one person who made her feel like she could finally be free. The days that followed were filled with tension and uncertainty. Lyra had hoped that her family would eventually come to accept her choice, that the more she fought for her freedom, the harder they pushed back. Her father's anger seemed to grow with each passing day, and her mother's coldness was unbearable. They continued to press her, trying to force her back into the life they had planned for her. But Lyra was firm, her heart set on the path she had chosen. Eli, by her side every step of the way, was a constant source of strength. He never wavered, always supporting her, never questioning her decision. His unwavering belief in her gave Lyra the courage to stand tall, even when it felt like the entire world was against them. One evening, as the sun began to set, casting an orange glow over the city, Lyra stood by the window of her family's grand estate. She could see the sprawling landscape of her home planet, the familiar sight of the grand buildings and towers that had once felt like home. But now, they felt suffocating. This was no longer her world. It was a world that had tried to control her, to mold her into something she wasn't. Behind her, Eli stood silently, watching her. He could sense the conflict within her, the battle between her love for him and her loyalty to her family. He knew she was torn, but he also knew that she had come too far to turn back now. "I never thought it would come to this," Lyra said quietly, her voice tinged with sadness. "I never imagined I would have to choose between my family and the person I love. But now, I see that there's no other choice. I can't go back to that life. I can't be the person they want me to be anymore." Eli stepped forward, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. "You've already made your choice, Lyra. And no matter what happens, I'll be here with you. We'll face this together." Lyra turned to him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "I know, but it's hard. I've spent my whole life trying to please them, trying to be what they expected. It's all I've ever known. And now, I'm walking away from all of it. I don't know if I'm strong enough for this." "You are," Eli said, his voice firm but gentle. "You're stronger than you think. You've already proven that. You're not alone in this. You've got me, and we'll find a way to make this work. We'll build a life that's ours, not theirs." Lyra smiled, the weight in her chest lifting slightly. She had spent so much time doubting herself, so much time worrying about the consequences of her choices. But with Eli by her side, she felt a sense of calm she hadn't known before. He believed in her, and for the first time, she believed in herself. The next day, Lyra made the hardest decision of her life. She walked into the grand hall of her family's estate, her heart pounding in her chest. Her father and mother were there, waiting, their expressions hard and unyielding. They had made it clear that they would not accept her choice, that they would never approve of her relationship with Eli. But Lyra was done waiting for their approval. She was done hiding who she was. "I've made my decision," she said, her voice steady but full of emotion. "I am not going back to the life you planned for me. I'm going to be with Eli. I've chosen a different path, and I'm not asking for your approval anymore. This is my life, and I will live it on my terms." Her father's face twisted with anger, but Lyra stood her ground. Her mother's silence was just as loud, but Lyra could feel her heart growing stronger with each word she spoke. "You can't control me anymore," she said softly. "I'm not your tool, your pawn. I am my own person, and I choose love." The silence that followed felt like an eternity. But finally, her father spoke. "You will regret this. You will never be welcome here again." Lyra nodded, her heart heavy but resolute. "Maybe. But I'd rather regret this than live a life of regret, not choosing what makes me happy." With those final words, Lyra turned and walked out of the grand estate, her head held high. Eli was waiting for her outside, his smile warm and reassuring. Together, they left behind everything Lyra had known, ready to face whatever the future held. It wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, Lyra felt like she was finally free. And that was all she needed. Lyra and Eli stood together at the edge of the planet's bustling spaceport, watching as the ships came and went, their engines roaring in the distance. The cold air of the city wrapped around them. But it didn't seem to matter anymore. For the first time in her life, Lyra felt like she could breathe, really breathe, without the weight of her past pressing down on her. Her decision was made, and there was no turning back. She had left her family, her home, and the world she had been born into. In their place, there was only this new future, a future with Eli, a future she had chosen for herself. The ship they were waiting for stood in front of them, its sleek surface glinting under the bright lights. It was a modest vessel, nothing like the grand ships of her family's fleet, but to Lyra it was everything. It represented freedom. It represented hope. "Are you sure about this?" Eli asked softly, looking at her with concern in his eyes. "We've left everything behind. It's going to be hard." Lyra turned to him, her heart swelling with affection. "It will be hard," she admitted, "but I'm ready for it. I know it won't be easy, but I'm not afraid anymore. Not with you by my side." Eli smiled, his eyes softening. He took her hand, squeezing it gently. "Then let's do this. We'll make a life of our own, together." With one final look at the planet behind them, Lyra stepped aboard the ship. The door closed with a quiet hiss, and they were off, leaving behind the only life Lyra had ever known. It felt strange, but also exhilarating. The ship soared into the stars, and with it, Lyra felt like she was leaving the past behind too. The journey was long, but as they traveled to a new, unknown planet, Lyra found herself reflecting on everything that had happened. The rejection from her family, the betrayal from her closest confidant, the difficult decisions she had made. Everything had led her to this moment. She had taken a leap of faith, and she had no idea what lay ahead, but for the first time, she didn't feel afraid of the unknown. The quiet comfort of the ship's cabin was interrupted by the soft hum of the engines. Eli sat beside her, flipping through a book he had found in the ship's small library. He didn't look up, but Lyra could sense that he was just as thoughtful as she was. They hadn't spoken much since they had left, each of them lost in their own thoughts, but the silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful. As the days passed, the uncertainty that once filled Lyra's heart began to fade. The new planet they had decided to settle on was small, quiet, and far from the hustle and bustle of her old life. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't a grand city, and it wasn't filled with riches, but it was a place where they could start fresh, a place where they could build something real. When they finally landed, the air was different, fresh, clean, and free of the pollution that had once filled her world. The land stretched out before them, open and vast. It was a world of possibilities, and for the first time, Lyra felt like she could truly begin again. Eli and Lyra stepped off the ship, their feet touching the soft ground of their new home. The sun set low on the horizon, painting the sky in warm hues of orange and pink. There was no grand ceremony, no loud celebrations, but in that quiet moment, Lyra knew that this was where she was meant to be. This was her new beginning. Together, they walked into the unknown, ready to create the life they had always dreamed of. It wasn't going to be easy, but Lyra was no longer afraid. She had found her freedom, her love, and her future, and that was enough. Months had passed since Lyra and Eli had left everything behind. The quiet planet they had chosen as their new home had become more than just a place to escape. It had become their sanctuary. The simple life they had always dreamed of was slowly taking shape, and though it was not without its challenges, it was theirs. Every day was a new opportunity to grow, to build, and to live freely. Lyra stood outside their small cottage one evening, gazing at the stars. The night sky was clear, and the stars above shimmered like diamonds. It was beautiful, peaceful, and for the first time in her life, it felt like she truly belonged. Eli walked up behind her, his footsteps soft on the grass. He stood beside her, his presence as steady as always. He didn't speak at first, simply watching the stars with her. "You know," he said after a long silence, "I never imagined my life would turn out this way. I thought I'd always be just another man in a quiet town, doing the same thing every day. But you've changed everything." Lyra smiled at him, her heart swelling with affection. I never imagined my life would turn out this way either. I always thought I was supposed to live according to someone else's rules. But with you, I found something I never knew I was looking for. Freedom." They stood together in comfortable silence, the soft sounds of the night filling the air. The simple life they had built was slowly becoming everything they had hoped for. They worked side by side on their small farm, growing their own food and building their own future. The struggle was there, of course. It wasn't easy, but it was theirs. And that made all the difference. Lyra had learned to appreciate the small things. The way the sun rose every morning, the feel of the earth beneath her feet, the quiet moments with Eli after a long day's work. She had learned to love the life she had never thought possible. As time passed, Lyra and Eli began to feel more like true equals, partners in every sense of the word. The bond between them deepened, strengthened by the shared experiences and the trust they had built. Lyra had come to realize that love wasn't about perfection. It was about understanding, supporting each other, and growing together. One afternoon, as they sat on their porch, sipping tea and watching the sunset, Eli turned to her with a thoughtful expression. "I've been thinking," he said. "We've come so far since we first met. You've gone through so much, Lyra, and I know you've left so much behind to be with me. But I want you to know that I'll never take this for granted. I'll spend every day trying to make this life as good as it can be for us." Lyra's eyes softened as she reached out to take his hand. "And I'll spend every day with you, Eli. No matter what the future holds, I know that as long as we're together, we can face anything." They sat in silence, the world around them quiet and still, the future uncertain but filled with promise. Lyra realized that no matter what had happened in the past, she had found her place. With Eli, she had found a love that was real, a life that was hers to build, and a future that was filled with endless possibilities. For the first time in her life, Lyra felt truly at peace. She had chosen her own path, and it was a path she was proud to walk. No matter where that path took her, she knew she was no longer running away from anything. She was finally running toward the life she had always dreamed of. Together, they would face whatever came next, and with each step, they would continue to build the life they had always wanted, side by side, hand in hand, ready for whatever the future held.